Hello and welcome to Microsoft Mechanics Live. Today we're going to take a special tour in terms of Ask Me Anything content for Windows deployment and management. And we're joined by Michael Niehaus from the Windows team. Everybody give him a warm round of applause. Welcome him on the stage. So Michael, we've been doing deployment within Windows and other teams for quite a few years. We wanted to give the audience really a chance to be able to ask the questions that they have around Windows deployment, update management, maybe autopilot, store for business, those types of things. So why don't we get started? What we're going to do is we're going to have like a board here of different topic suggestions that we have around Windows as a service. What we'll do is we'll take a little vote about the most exciting topics here. After that vote, we're going to drill into the most excited area. So anybody want to hear about Windows Autopilot? Round of applause, actually. Make it as loud as you can. Okay, that one did pretty good. How about Windows as a service? About the same, roughly. Okay, co-management in Config Manager and Intune. I'm guessing there's a lot of Config Manager users among us.
Sounds that way.
Windows Update for Business. All right. Microsoft Store for Business. It's okay.
Oh, come on, give the store some
my
love.
favorite, subscription activation. Subscription activation, anybody? All right, so we're going to start with Config Manager and Intune co-management. So let's get some questions. Raise your hand if you've got a question. Yes, this gentleman here in the gray shirt. So please use the microphone. Oh, hold on. Turn on the microphone.
Hello? Okay. Hi, Michael. So co-management and Intune for, I guess this Windows as a service ties into that. How can we position that with the customers? Where should they start? And how much should they plan to have that rolled out, say, with the next release in Fall Creators Update?
Yeah, if you look at co-management and kind of how it fits in with autopilot and all these other modern IT-based scenarios, it's really about building a bridge from your traditional IT to modern IT, where we've talked over the last couple of years about how you could kind of segment your population down the middle and say, this group, they're traditional, but these road warriors that travel to coffee shops and all kinds of different places and aren't typically connected to the corporate network, we'll do those via modern management. What we've kind of shifted to now is saying we don't have to separate that vertically anymore. We're saying that we can separate it horizontally and look at it more as a function by function thing. So we can use autopilot to set up a typical corporate device, even that's connected to the corporate network, join it to Active Directory, get it enrolled in Intune, get it registered with Azure AD, and also get it managed with Config Manager at the same time. At that point, you can look at the different functions that are performed and say, let's do settings management with Intune and software distribution with Config Manager. And over time, move more and more functions into the cloud so that eventually you then look and say, well, I'm not using Config Manager for anything more. I can now shut down my on-prem infrastructure and everything's in the cloud. And that's the long-term journey that there were some customers that said, we're going to do that journey in one step and we're going to do it overnight. But there are a lot more customers out there saying, give me points along that path that I can do in smaller increments. So that's really been the focus with co-management, to be able to move to those modern type scenarios, like with autopilot, not doing imaging, but not in such a huge disruptive single change.
Okay. So any other questions on co-management? Yes, one in the back.
Is there any documentation available that lays out the sort of the step-by-step to get to that long-term plan where we can turn down and decommission the SCCM infrastructure and just do the cloud management eventually?
Yeah, I think there will be. I just don't think that it's out there yet. And if you look at the Config Manager announcements made this week around that, that was the first public mention of this anywhere. I mean, there have been some behind the doors conversations related to that, but they're just getting to the point now where that starts to show up in insider preview versions so that you can start to experiment with that. So once it shows up in the preview builds, then you should be able to see the documentation that goes along with it. From a kind of the higher level perspective, obviously you have the management piece and the, I would say, authentication piece. Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, Intune, Config Manager. So those are the two biggest pieces. In the case of Active Directory and Azure Active Directory, they already work together pretty well, and there's quite a bit of documentation that talks about how to set up synchronization between the two to get you prepared for that. What would then be added by the Config Manager team would be instructions on how to coexist Intune and Config Manager, and then you start talking about workloads and how to move those from one to the other. The discussions with the Config Manager team yesterday in an Ask the Expert session that we had in one of the big rooms, someone asked the question, all right, well, we've gone through all of these migration processes and we've moved all of our workloads from Config Manager to Intune. How do we then get rid of the Config Manager client on the machines? Like, well, we haven't even designed that yet. So the expectation is this takes a while for most organizations to go through this migration process to get rid of those pieces. And by the time you're ready to then turn off Config Manager or maybe turn off Active Directory, we'll have caught up with the functionality and documentation necessary for those final steps to get you completely to the cloud.
So one last question then on co-management, if there's another question. Anyone? All right, if not, we'll move on to another topic. I think the next topic that was next most popular was probably, well, either Autopilot or Windows as a Service. So why don't we go to Windows as a Service? Any questions on Windows as a Service? No questions on Windows as a Service. Okay, then can you explain Windows as a Service, because you've authored the most succinct blog ever written on the topic?
Yeah, I think the summary was just to lay out the high points. We have releases twice per year.
Mm-hmm.
Each of those releases is serviced and supported for 18 months. We aligned with Office 365 Pro Plus with the same release and support timeframes. And we also have aligned with Config Manager, who extended their servicing timelines to make sure that you could run the same Config Manager version for the duration of a particular Windows 10 release.
Okay.
That's the summary. I mean, the real questions when we get deeper into those conversations then is why and how. So that's what we went through in several of the sessions around Windows as a Service this week.
And the nice thing there as well is the alignment with Office 365 Pro Plus, because we also, on the Office side, are on a 6-month cadence for semi-annual updates, aligned to the timing roughly of the Windows releases as well, so that you can continue getting those monthly kind of quality updates, and then you can get the semi-annual updates, and they're supported for 18 months effectively per update, or per feature update, I should say, for either Office or Windows. So the alignment there has been a pretty big deal for us as well.
Yeah, and the bigger changes were actually on the Office side. When we announced the alignment in April, Windows was already intending to do twice per year, so we just made that official, and our previous rules around Windows as a Service would have resulted in an 18-month servicing window anyway. So the bigger change was with Office saying that, hey, we'll go from 3 times a year down to 2 times a year. We'll align with Windows and lengthen what was a 12-month window for Office. So good overall, and very positively received as far as that alignment goes.
Right, and one of the things that you can do to get started with Windows as a Service is to use Windows Insider. So if you're not part of that program, join Windows Insider. There's a business side to that as well, but that's one of the great ways to kind of start using it and testing it as well. We have a question here in the back for Windows as a Service. Let me go back to.
So I love Windows as a Service. Yay! Every 6 months. Yay! When are you going to introduce a Windows as a Service for business, eliminating the games, the mixed reality, Xbox, and all that stuff? My business really does not like it, and my C levels, when they saw the Candy Crush in there, not that good.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to understand that there are two pieces to that. One are the applications that are built into the operating system. Most of those can be removed. It is an extra step that you had to go through. The other is applications that get pushed down to the device when the user signs in. We do have a policy that you can set to disable those applications from being pushed down. The disable consumerization experiences policy can be set. That's where Candy Crush comes from, and Twitter and a few other applications that get pushed down to the machine. So that's easy to turn off. You just set that policy via MDM or GPO and you're set there. The inbox applications, there are some technical reasons why we want to have the same set of applications in all SKUs, and that's primarily because we can transform from one SKU to the other without even rebooting. So it's problematic for us to say this SKU will have these apps and that SKU will have a different set of apps. But at least we can now do a more intelligent job of respecting what you've done to remove those applications. With Windows 10 1703, when we released that, any apps that the user had uninstalled won't come back. We respect that they've been uninstalled and we won't put them back. With Windows 10 1709, when it comes out next month, we'll also respect the IT choices. So if you as IT have deprovisioned applications, we won't put those deprovisioned applications back either. So at least at that point, you can remove them once using PowerShell, and we publish scripts that explain how to do that. You just won't have to worry about them then coming back with each feature update after that. So we're making it easier. They'll still be there, but at least you can get rid of them and not have to worry about them again.
So we had one more question, I think, on Windows as a Service. Yes. Then we'll move on to Autopilot.
So the question's about Windows Insider for Business. Is there any chance for support for remote server administration tools on the Insider builds for testing in the infrastructure and the environment?
I was thinking that they already were supported on Windows Insider builds. The interesting thing about the RSAT tools, initially they were very specific to a version of Windows. So every time you released a new version of Windows, you needed a new version of the RSAT tools. After a while, they realized that that was a bit problematic, so they made the RSAT tools basically version independent, so the package could be installed on top of any Windows release. The thing that's missing right now is something that we're still working on. As you install each new Insider build, RSAT doesn't come back because it's an out-of-box feature on demand, and setup doesn't know where to get it, so as a result, it can't pull it back. That's something that we're looking to address in the near future by making that available through Windows Update or even through WSUS at some point, so that we could automatically reinstall that as part of the installation of a feature update, which on the Insider side, since it happens once a month or once a week, or for some of us, once a day, you don't have to keep reinstalling it all the time.
Oh, thank you. I checked that out. Thanks.
All right, let's move on to our last topic. One more note on Windows as a Service. Server is also aligning to that model as well. We had Jeff Woolsey on Monday here talking about 1709 for server. Let's talk about Windows Autopilot, because I know there are some questions around that. Anybody with a question on Autopilot? Yes, you in the front. We'll get a mic to you. So Windows Autopilot is something brand new where we can customize the out-of-box experience.
So my question is that during the OOBE, if a user goes through the process and they click that cool little button in the lower left-hand corner when it asks to connect to a network, skip, they complete OOBE, creating a local administrator account. If at a later point in time, when they do connect to the internet, does Autopilot do anything to then begin to automatically bring that device into a managed mode? And if not, is that something that you plan to fix?
Yeah, so at this point, if you skip the network connection, Autopilot is basically designed to simplify UBI. So Autopilot doesn't do anything right now afterwards. So let's say you go ahead and you set up the machine with a local account, or you set it up with a Microsoft account, and you then wanted to turn it into an enterprise device. You could certainly go through the process of joining that device to Azure Active Directory, and Azure Active Directory would take care of enrolling it in management and could then configure the device. The other option is to reset the device and start over again from UBI. There aren't any significant discussions at this point about changing that, but if you really look at the flow overall, Autopilot does the initial bootstrapping and trying to simplify UBI so that it's understandable by the typical end user. And then after that, it's the management tool, Intune or another MDM service, doing most of the work to configure the device. So after you're already through UBI, there's not a whole lot of point for Autopilot to be involved in the flow after that. Now, there are certainly challenges for the end user who wants to go through that process later, which is why the reset and start over is probably an easier option for most users, because it's easy to explain to them. Go into settings, initiate a reset, and now it will go back through UBI. And if they really wanted to, they could just reseal the machine and UBI would pop back up again and they could go through that. But I'd hate to see you send out instructions to the end user saying run sysprep.exe/UBI, and it will do the rest for you after you reboot.
Okay, we've got time for 2 more questions. Anything on Autopilot before we leave that topic? Yes, up here in the front.
Hi, so on Autopilot, is there a way to maybe sanitize OEM installed applications and stuff outside of trying to build out scripting for individual OEM applications, as some of the vendors like to install a bunch of stuff that we don't necessarily want on these systems?
Yeah, today we can take care of that as part of the Clean PC feature that we introduced in Windows 10 17.03. That can only be initiated right now, though, through a provisioning package. So you could have a device, boot it up, hit the Windows key 5 times, select a provisioning package to reset the machine and leave all that stuff behind. And after that's complete, then go through the Autopilot flow to continue setting up the device. We are looking at a mechanism that could initiate that remotely, so that as you go through Autopilot and get the device joined to Azure Active Directory and enrolled in Intune, that Intune could push down a command to the machine saying, go ahead and reset the device with the clean PC mode so that it comes back up again, picks up where it left off, still joined to Azure Active Directory and Intune to configure the rest of the device from that point. That's not in there right now, so at this point, if you wanted to clean the machine easily, it needs to be done by a provisioning package.
All right, we got time for one final question. It can be about, let's try to go on the stripe below here if we can, update for business, store for business, or subscription activation. Is there one last question across any of these topics? Gentleman walking in has a question, looks like.
It was actually about Autopilot. I was standing over there waving my hand, but it's fine. On one of the sessions that we went to, they said that when you do the provisioning for OOBE, that if you wanted to, you can configure it to not complete, or not have those skip buttons on the network and stuff like that. But you're saying, what you're saying conflicts with that. So are you familiar with that? Is that something super new, something that's going to be released in 2 years?
I mean, today you can bypass Autopilot. And if you bypass the network connection, well, then Autopilot has no way of checking in with the cloud service to see if the device is defined. So there is no way of avoiding that today. We didn't want to get into a situation where you had a device that was trapped in UBI because you had no way to make an actual internet connection. In some cases, maybe you get to a captive portal where you just can't complete the process. So we didn't want to trap the device. That being able to escape out of that at least lets you get to maybe a local account and use the device in that state for a period of time.
What if we want the device trapped?
Today we don't offer that as an option. What we are looking at is something that Sid talked about in one of his sessions, where we can mandate that the device remain managed. So once it's been set up once, then anytime the device is reset, it won't let you go through that flow without joining the device to Azure Active Directory and getting it re-enrolled in management. But that initial setup, there's always an escape button today. Over time, as we get more than 12 to 18 months out, that's something that we can consider, but in the near term, that's the setup.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was our last question. Just another reminder, in the next few weeks, we're going to have the Fall Creators Update release and be broadly available for broad deployment. And we wanted to be able to actually throw up a couple of links here and resources also that you can check out in terms of getting more information around Autopilot, Windows as a Service, and Windows Analytics. So check out the links shown. That's about all the time we have for this show with Michael here in the Ask Me Anything session. Of course, you can keep checking back to Microsoft Mechanics each and every week for the latest updates across Microsoft. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.